It's safe to say that everyone listening to this has lost something or someone at some point in their lives. It is an inevitability of existence. Grief comes for all of us at some point, as it is woven into the tapestry of life as death is, and the two go hand in hand often. But what if you had the power to undo your greatest losses, to fix the scars that exist not only physically in some instances, but mentally and emotionally? Now, what if you believed you held the key to do this for everyone in existence, every single person? Would you pursue this path? It's easy to say you would do this, but what if it made you into a villain? What if the very fabric of existence was threatened by your efforts? Would you have the will? Would you be able to look the universe you know in the face and vanish it from existence? Such an act is far beyond the scope of the universe we inhabit, luckily. Yet, in the multiverse of Magic the Gathering, this very concept has been the thread that has led up to this year's final in-universe set and the end of an entire story arc, Reality Fracture. Legendary telepath and blue mage Jace Beleren is on the cusp of creating a mirror universe, undoing every tragic event that the multiverse we all know and love has been through since Magic's inception. Yawgmoth, Nicol Bolas, the Eldrazi incursion, the War of the Spark, the Phyrexian invasion, and countless other struggles that have caused irreversible damage to the multiverse. Jace wants all of these erased, all the people he lost throughout these events restored, and a universe made that wouldn't know suffering, a version of him made that wouldn't know pain to the same extent. And so far in the story, he's been willing to do anything for this greater goal. This is because, at this point, Jace Beleren, one of the most traumatized figures in all of Magic the Gathering, is a victim of his own guilt, and more importantly, his own grief. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the DrawGo podcast. I'm your host, Jake, known in some spaces as SlyCrow, and today we're going to be analyzing and delving into Reality Fracture, Jace Beleren, and grief. To say that Jace Beleren is familiar with loss is an understatement. His losses begin in his youth and mount until the present day in the Magic storyline. Yet, this episode is not going to give you a complete summary of Jace's life, nor will we be recounting every single loss he's endured. We'd honestly be here forever. Yet, it is important for our analysis here to understand a few key things about Jace as a man and as a planeswalker. The first of which we just touched upon, the key idea that Jace has undergone a tremendous amount of loss and trauma. He's suffered abuse, he's lost people, he's been hurt by people he loves time and time again, and in turn, he has hurt people that he loves dearly, time and time again. And perhaps one of his most traumatizing internalized feelings is that, in his own mind, he failed the multiverse catastrophically when it needed him to succeed the most. Of course, this brings us to the second most important part of Jace's character. He feels guilt around and an immense amount of responsibility to the multiverse as a whole. Jace is Magic the Gathering's resident telepath extraordinaire. He's extremely powerful, a natural telepath with a hand in any unshielded mind within his vicinity. A worse man would use his power to rule those weaker than himself, but that is not who Jace is. Once he began mastering his powers, he took it upon himself to be careful with them. He regrets having to hurt people, at least those who don't really deserve it, and in his early days, he did hurt people, don't get me wrong. Yet, his growth as a character reflects his desire to be good. It wasn't something that always came easy to him, and his time in the Infinite Consortium proved that. Jace is a planeswalker. He was the living Guild Pact, a member of the Gatewatch. He has always felt that he bears an endless responsibility to the multiverse that he calls home, and of course, to the people of the various planes that inhabit it. And still, he fails at it. Jace was not a good guild pact, and the now broken Gatewatch had suffered horrible defeats at the claws of Nicol Bolas and Elesh Norn. And in that time, Jace kept losing. He kept losing people, battles, planes, and eventually, even himself. Now, in the Magic storyline, we see a Jace compounded with loss and taking initiative on an action he thinks will help. We join a man whose internalized weight of responsibility joins together with his internalized grief at everything that has fallen on him and his loved ones through the years and years of multiversal tragedy. Loss has defined the multiverse for many years now in Magic's story. We see the scars of the Phyrexian invasion almost everywhere we journey to. We see the grief of the war and how it takes its toll on those who survive. We understand through environmental and character storytelling how loss has, in a way, defined the multiverse for a long, long time. And in a similar vein, Jace is exactly the same way, a reflection of the multiverse. He is a man consumed by the idea of what should be, not what is. His PTSD around his completion by the Phyrexians, by the completion of his beloved Vraska, and the destruction that change wrought on the multiverse is still destroying him. As such, he is unwavering in his desire to undo the outcome. Once Jace tried to bring the ending, now he seeks a new beginning, and it's a blossom that is grown from a seed of grief that has been growing in him for a long time, watered by loss itself. The most important concept to realize about Jace in this frame of mind is that he is overcome with grief, but he's refusing to listen to it. He is seeking action, and in doing so, he isn't properly acknowledging or learning from it. Dr. Mary Frances O'Connor, in an interview with the American Psychological Association, explains that grieving is a form of learning. To summarize, she explains that to grieve, truly, is to learn how to exist in the world as it is now. It is the learning of how to walk in the world, or in Jace's case, many worlds, carrying the weight of absence, of loss, and working through grief. Grief is meant to be a lesson, a new understanding of how the universe works in spite of or in tandem with one's losses. The change of habits, the work that one goes through to understand and to exist despite everything that has happened. Grief's lesson is perseverance and acceptance as one and the same, to find, if not peace, then an understanding. Yet, in the case of Jace Beleren, there is no learning. Instead, we see the resistance to grief, the refusal of it, the struggle to unravel what is and fight for one's personal what should be, the desire to undo the cause of the grief so strong that it manifests as action. It is as if Jace is unable to move past the denial stage of grieving and instead twists it into a weapon to fight the grief he feels. Instead of facing the new future he could be making, he instead turns to the past and aims to forge his future into a mimicry of it. Yet, the pieces for Jace to accept his grief were right there. Vraska and loot were everything he really needed to begin processing everything that he'd gone through, even before the invasion. But he simply couldn't. His guilt mixed in with his grief to the point where he's unable to accept exactly what the grief was trying to teach him. He couldn't learn the lessons because his own power blinded him. His denial blinded him. He wasn't able to accept the world as it is now because he believed that he has the power to make the world into what he wants it to be, what it should be. But in this process too, refusing to acknowledge his own grief, pursuing this path, he leaves only grief in his wake. His mental attack on Chandra, using Tam, freeing Nicol Bolas, and the rifts he's causing elsewhere all stem from his inability to learn the lessons he needs to from his own grief. In a way, his ends justify the means attitude of his plan, the desire to make his perfect universe, feels eerily similar to an enemy that has caused him so much grief in the very recent past. Of course, the parallels to be drawn between Jace's plan to remake the universe in his perfect image and the grand ideology of New Phyrexia's mother of machines, Elesh Norn, are not few or far between. However, the greater comparisons between the two could be a whole separate podcast episode. For our purposes here, the similarities are merely to highlight that Jace's actions, manipulated by his avoidance and refusal to understand his grief, are leading him down a road that has caused so much devastation previously. It is from this point that we can begin to dissect how Jace's refusal of his own grief begins a different sort of transformation, one of villainous potential. When one can't acknowledge properly the anger that stems from their grief, it manifests in unhealthy and destructive ways. In Jace's story, his anger manifests in an unwavering belief that the multiverse is wrong. This uncaring, unloving multiverse that would allow all of this suffering is wrong. The idea that he needs to fix this place becomes central to him as a person. The multiverse is wrong, and he needs to make it right. But fundamentally, Jace is lashing out from his anger and a misunderstanding of the multiverse. The multiverse isn't wrong, and it isn't right. It just is. According to Dr. Cynthia Vihar, anger is an outward-facing reaction to grief. It is an emotion that allows one to grab some semblance of power back from the helplessness that grief manifests in one's body and mind. Dr. Vihar says anger can drive wedges between loved ones by turning relationships into battlegrounds filled with conflict. Obviously, in the case of Jace Beleren, this couldn't be more true in a literal sense. His ambitions to fix the multiverse in accordance to how he sees it have left Chandra hurt and wanting to kill him, Nicol Bolas free with his memories restored, and his own body and mind destroyed in the meditation realm through his own hubris, and perhaps left scattered elsewhere. And this is because he's not listening to the lessons that his grief is trying to show him. He's leaning into destructive anger under the guise of betterment. From the same article, Dr. Vihar explains that when dealing with grief and the anger that comes with it, they have something to teach you if you're willing to listen and learn. And that's just it. Jace refuses to listen to anyone but his own anger. He will not acknowledge that his mission is fueled by what he lost, even when it's right there in front of him. He will put the entire existence of everything he loves or did love in peril because his grief is pushing his mind to focus on what he lost. Because grief is a reflection of what you've lost. Of course, grief at its most simple aspect is all of the love that you have felt for a person, a thing, a place, with nowhere left to pour it into. Dr. Tanya Kotler, in a personal essay, writes on how grief is relational, how it is a mirror of a relationship even once the relationship has ended. How fitting, then, that Jace Beleren's answer to his grief is the construction of the Echoverse, a physical reality manifested to pour his love, his care, his responsibility into. In its creation, we witness the culmination of a grief misunderstood and an anger misdirected. We witness what happens to a man who cannot accept how things are and will not rest until the universe fits his vision. And yet, fitting the classic trope, you can't fight the laws of the universe, at least insofar as we have seen the bits and pieces of this mirror universe. For those not caught up on the magic storyline, a brief explanation of the Echoverse is that it is an entire mirror universe taking shape in a reality opposite to the Strixhaven school on the plane of Arcavios. Zimone Wola, math mage prodigy from the Quandrix College, discovered the shadow of Jace's new universe in her time on Ravnica. A shadow, a tear, something wrong. And it is fitting that the Echoverse appears as a shadow, because, in metaphor, that is really all it is. We see from spoiler cards the arrival of Ral Zarek, guest lecturer, and the White Liliana, as well as the art for the Reality Fracture set, that something isn't correct in Jace's new reality. His desire to make the universe as he believes it should be has made it wrong. It is the universal embodiment of something that came back wrong, something that should not be alive and yet is forced into existence by a creator consumed by hubris and, in this case, guilt. But from a story perspective, the Echoverse is a perfect metaphor for Jace's grief. It is something unstable, reflective, and in conflict with reality. Furthermore, just like his own grief, Jace's Echoverse appears to be consuming in nature as it threatens to swallow up the original multiverse. So too did Jace's grief swallow him whole. In one of my favorite quotes, Canadian essayist and poet Anne Carson says, "Why does tragedy exist? Because you are full of rage. Why are you full of rage? Because you are full of grief." It's existential and explanatory, and it explores where tragedy comes from. Jace has constructed a mirror for his grief, a reflection of everything he's lost that he would see restored. And in doing so, he has begun tearing the multiverse apart, causing more devastation, and as we can see in the art for Reality Fracture, more conflict. In seeking to avoid more pain for the multiverse, in ignoring his grief, he has simply become another multiversal threat that his former friends will need to stop. And that brings us to Reality Fracture. Now Jace will pit his new multiverse against the old and become a threat on the same level as many of the villains that he had previously had to face. He'll unleash the Echoverse on his friends and most likely hurt them in the process. Characters new and old will be changed from this and be delivered new trauma no matter the outcome. Jace will make his friends face themselves, fight to the death, to have one multiverse emerge victorious. And in my theory, at the end of it all, he will need to face himself as well. Maybe we will see Magic's most famous blue mage restored with a clear head and a new understanding. Or maybe this new Jace, a fragment, the theorist, who will succeed. Either way, Jace's grief has broken the multiverse. We'll see if he's able to put it back together, or perhaps he will bring the ending of one multiverse for the birth of another. That brings us to the end of this episode. If you enjoyed this topic, make sure you leave the show a like. If you want more episodes like this, then please subscribe on YouTube, on the SlyCrow channel, and rate the show on Spotify. It helps so much. What's your hype level for Reality Fracture? What is your opinions on Jace Beleren? Remember, if you want more content, follow the SlyCrow YouTube channel, where you'll find the DrawGo podcast, deck techs, shorts, gameplay videos, and more. And go ahead and follow us on Instagram at DrawGo Podcast. Thank you for listening, and until next time, guys, have a great week.